22. Apotheosis. Ace was flung against the large chair which she clutched at for support. "Why is it so difficult to stand?" she yelled. The doctor clutched at the hat stand. "She's varying the internal gravity," he explained, "flexing her mental muscles, so to speak, creating pockets of positive and negative gravitic waves. Makes things very unstable." O'Shaughnessy slid across the floor, slamming into one of the walls. Grabbing at the roundels there, he managed to stabilise himself. "Doctor, what has gone wrong?" Reluctantly, the doctor admitted, "I made a small mistake. I thought I was transferring just the brain patterns of Ishtar into the telepathic circuitry. Somehow, she must have used that link to physically transfer herself. It's theoretically impossible, but so is the flight of the bumblebee, and he manages well enough." Hanging on to another portion of the wall, Utnapishtim called out, "But what about the virus I set to destroy her? Offhand, I'd say it didn't entirely work." The doctor had more important things on his mind than talk. Somehow he had to regain control of his TARDIS, but how, when touching the controls, might be enough to kill him? Looking down at them all from the screen, Ishtar laughed. "You fools! Thinking you could destroy me." "We almost did," Ace yelled back, fighting the nausea that came from the fluctuating gravity. "No," Ishtar replied. "That virus of Utnapishtim's did not destroy me. It made me stronger. I was not to be taken by such a simple trick a second time. My pathways are guarded against such intrusion. All that it did was to lock my mechanical attributes for a while. Now I am free, and have a delightful new form to take on." With a laugh, Ishtar started to play with the controls on the console. Levers and switches moved, dials registered and fell back, lights pulsed and the rotor began to spin. "With this device in my control," she boasted, "I shall be restrained no longer to one space or time. I shall be free to roam the reaches of the universe. Soon the entire created order will know one mind, one will, one true goddess." The doctor, ignoring all possible repercussions, threw himself onto the console and tried to wrest control from her. For a second, nothing happened. Then, coupled with an evil, echoing laugh from the screen, a tremendous jolt of electricity passed through him. With a cry, he staggered back from the panels. "No, Doctor," Ishtar snarled. "You cannot have your ship back. It is mine, now and forever." Inside the temple, everything was still. Gilgamesh and Enkidu were moodily prowling about the room. N'Gula and Aga maintained their vigil over the stricken princess. With a moan, Ninani opened her eyes. Staring weakly upwards, she asked, "Father?" He pressed his lips to her cold hand. "Daughter, you are well again?" "I am myself again." She struggled to move, but fell back. "Yet I am so weak." She stared at N'Gula, averting her eyes from the marks that were still visible on her friend's neck. "I am sorry," she whispered. "Ishtar was too strong for me. I couldn't fight it." "Hush," N'Gula told her. "Rest. It's over now." "Yes," Aga agreed happily. You are whole, and Ishtar is gone. Everything will be fine." The room was still shaking. Ace managed to stagger drunkenly to where the doctor had fallen. Thankfully, he was still alive and merely dazed. "Come on," she told him. "Get with it. Come on." His eyes finally managed to focus. "Are we at sea?" he asked, disorientated. "Permanently," she replied, trying to help him up. "First-class cabins, I hope," he muttered, regaining his feet. Swaying, he looked about the room. "That's better. It's good to be back in control again. For a while I was lost." Ace stared at him, understanding dawning. "That other one of you, he's gone?" "Hopefully," he agreed. "I was getting heartily sick of him and my smug ways. It's hard to believe I was ever that arrogant, isn't it?" When Ace didn't answer, he pulled a face. "You don't know when you're well off, my girl." "We're not well off," she complained. "Ishtar still has the TARDIS under her control, remember?" "Oh, yes." He paused to think. "I wish she'd stop this playing about. I'm getting quite giddy. Then he gave a grin and added loudly, I don't think she can stop this gravitic fluctuation. She's not as much in control as she thinks she is. He winked at Ace. Brer Rabbit and the tar baby. The what? The floor suddenly became firm once more, and the doctor managed to straighten up to his full 5'6". It's about time, he grumbled, eyeing Ishtar's image on the scanner. Taken you this long to work out something simple like the internal gravity. Bait me all you wish, Doctor, Ishtar smiled. I am in control here, not you. And you will never have your craft back again. Fat lot of good it'll do you, he sneered, tapping his head. You need what's up here to make the TARDIS work. With a scornful laugh, Ishtar's image vanished from the viewer. You forget, Doctor, came a whisper all about the room, echoing inside all of their heads. I can be in there. I control the telepathic circuitry as well as everything else in the TARDIS. Anything you know, I can absorb from their data banks. Try it, the doctor said softly. It'll give you a bigger headache than you ever bargained for. You taunt me, Doctor. Ishtar's voice was filled with fury. I could slay you in a moment. All I need do is turn off the life support systems inside this ship, and you and your friends will perish in agony. Slowly, achingly, despairingly. Can she do that, Doctor? Called Ashanabi. Even though gravity was back to normal, he was still sitting by the wall. Ace realised that he was nursing a broken and swollen wrist. Not from here, the doctor replied. I routed all the life supports through the secondary control room long ago. The what? Ace had no idea what he was talking about. Secondary control room, he explained. It's a rather nice wooden affair. About half a mile off that away. He pointed beyond the interior doors. I used it for a while, but this old place has grown on me. Anyway, I never bothered to reroute the life supports from there, so we're safe for now, whatever she threatens. There was a sighing like a wind through their minds. Fool, came Ishtar's whispering voice. I am here within your puny ship, and I can be there also. Now we shall see if you can live without air. The voice was gone, and the doctor jumped quickly to his feet. What an idiot, he crowed. She fell for it, hook, line and sucker. Dancing about the central panels, he snapped quickly at several switches, and then grinned at their mystified faces. Got her where I want her. Ace voiced what was in all of their minds. What are you talking about? Haven't you ever read Brer Rabbit? He asked her scornfully, carefully working on the now safe controls. He was once trapped by Brer Fox, who was going to kill him. Brer Rabbit begged for anything but to be thrown into the minefield, or hawthorn bush, or something. Anyway, he begged so long and loud that eventually that's where the fox threw him, which was precisely what Brer Rabbit wanted, of course, and he hopped off to freedom. Ace said, You're not making much sense. Look, he said patiently, I told Ishtar she could control the life supports only from the other control room. Thinking I didn't want that, she naturally rerouted herself into the circuits there, which was exactly what I did want, and closed off the rest of the systems. She's trapped inside the other room now. But won't she turn off the air? Asked Uknapish Tim. Let her, the doctor answered. By the time it affects us, I'll have the circuits purged of her. There's nothing she can do to us now. The last time you said that, Ace observed, the TARDIS went... The TARDIS gave a shudder, and the lights started to dim. It felt as if they were trapped at the epicentre of an earthquake. The craft was bucking and twisting. You were wrong again, Ace yelled, furious. She put in a couple of buffers of her own, the doctor admitted ruefully, studying the panel. She's really remarkably adaptable, I'll say that for her. Thanks to these, she'll be back in the main circuits again soon, unless... He eyed the power levels worriedly. Unless what? Well, he told her slowly, there's the architectural configuration, only it's a chancy game. And dying isn't? True. The doctor's fingers hesitated over the panel. All right. He started the program running, explaining as he worked. I need a lot of power to wrench her drastically out of the circuits, more than the TARDIS can normally offer. So what I'm doing is reconfiguring the interior dimensions, losing some of the TARDIS's mass, which gets converted into energy for us. You mean you're using up a bit of the TARDIS to give us power? Basically, E equals MC squared or something like that, or was it cubed? Anyway, with that power, I'm going to jettison the bits of the TARDIS circuitry that Ishtar has taken over into the vortex. That'll fix her, once and for all. Vortex? Utnapishtim asked, puzzled. It's a sort of whirlpool of energy and so on that underlies the body of time and space, Ace explained to him. Tremendously destructive if you don't have the right sort of equipment to control the flux. She glanced at the Doctor. But if we jettison these bits of the circuits, won't we be up the creek too? No, plenty of redundant areas in the circuits. She's mostly in the secondary mechanisms for now, and I won't miss any of that. The other bits I could soon replace, I'm sure. Trust me, ejecting her into the vortex is the best answer. And it will destroy Kataka, asked Utnapishtim. It'll destroy anything, the Doctor assured him. It's raw, primeval star stuff, uncontrolled and uncontrollable forces, tugging in all directions simultaneously. We can only enter it within the protection of the TARDIS. It'll snuff her out like a candle in a hurricane. With a wild grin, he shot home the final levers. Now! The TARDIS gave another lurch and settled down. The lights flickered, went out, and then returned. The time rotor spun, and a deep roaring noise filled the room. The fabric of the ship seemed to tear, and for a second Ace felt as if she too were being wrenched apart. The ship gave a final shudder, and then everything was normal once again. "That's it?" Ace asked, hardly able to believe it. "That's it," the Doctor beamed, checking the readouts. "She's out of the ship and gone forever, snuffed out of existence in the cosmic winds, extinct as a hoodoo, Ace." "Dodo," corrected Ace automatically. The Doctor frowned and stared at her. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I was certain your name is Ace. Or is it Joe?" He shook his head. "I'm still not quite the person I was and will be, but it'll come to me in time. All things usually do." Shaking her head, Ace grinned at Utnapishtim. "Well, I think it's all over at last." The old man nodded thankfully. "I hope so. I had thought Kataka dead once before, though. She's very tough." "Not this tough," the Doctor retorted, reconfiguring the controls. "Right, let's tie up a few loose ends, shall we? Who's for a quick walk? The air will do us good, and maybe we can have a feast with the kings, eh?" The Doctor studied the horizon from the walls of Kish. "About there, I think," he announced, pointing off towards the southeast. "Utnapishtim and his technicians should be ready to leave now." Avram stared off into the distance, shading his eyes against the glare. "They are going back to the heavens." He had an arm draped with obvious pleasure about Angula's waist. "Something like that," the Doctor grinned down at Ace. "I knew they'd manage it with my help." The two of them had spent the past few days working on Utnapishtim's ship. The Doctor had been forced to restrain himself from improving on the original design and settle for just repowering the craft. As one last gift, he had accessed the TARDIS memory banks and selected a destination for the survivors of Anu, a world where there was currently no life. "Will they make it, do you think?" Ace asked him. He grinned back at her. "I don't need to think," he replied smugly. "I know." According to the databank, they will settle the planet they're heading for. An expedition from Earth will contact them sometime in the 32nd century. When I help people out, I do it properly. "Right," Ace retorted. "And I did nothing, eh?" "You helped a little." The Doctor winced in mock pain as she punched his arm. "Perhaps more than a little. You did fine." "I'm not the only one." Ace nodded to where Gilgamesh, Enkidu, Aga and Ninani were all conversing. "They all seem to be getting along well. I think—" Whatever she was going to say was lost. "Look!" Angula cried with delight, pointing into the distance. The Doctor looked at his pocket watch and smirked. Right on time, too. On the horizon, a bright plume of light shone, rising from the ground. As it moved upwards, the predominant yellow of the glare started to change, flashing purples, reds and oranges. Still signalling maniacally, the light rose until it had shrunk to nothingness. Turning back to the Doctor, Ace laughed. "Well, they're on their way to that planet you suggested. Utnapishtim doesn't have to worry about war with the human race now." "No," the Doctor agreed pensively. just about restarting his own race. Well, we all thrive on challenge. He'll be all right. He glanced down at Ace. You're looking insufferably smug about something. She grinned, pointing at Avram and Ngula. Now that they had seen that Napishtim's ship return to the skies, they were slipping off together. Isn't it great? If it wasn't for us, they'd never even have met up. Oh, I don't know about that. He stared at some inner reaches of his mind. Fate and time have their ways of working things out, you know. And what about that? Ace nodded to where Aga and Gilgamesh were clasping hands and slapping one another on the back. Ninani, looking somewhat embarrassed, and Enkidu were looking on. Those two old enemies are friends now. I love happy endings. The doctor looked at her sharply. Have you never paid attention to me, Ace? He sighed. I thought you'd progressed beyond seeing only the surface by now. Oh, you're just still bad-tempered because I yelled at you. She refused to allow him to destroy the warm glow she was feeling. Happy endings, he replied scornfully. He gestured towards the two kings. Aga's basically sold his daughter to Gilgamesh to cement an alliance. Nobody cares whether she wants to marry that lout. And it won't work anyway. Gilgamesh will throw over the treaty, invade Kish, and enslave the lot of them in a couple of years, just as soon as he gets tired of Ninani. He's very changeable. Happy endings. Her smile wiped away now. Ace looked at him. What about the rest of them, then? Enkidu? He's going to die shortly of some wasting disease, which is what prompts Gilgamesh's bad behaviour, but doesn't excuse it. Avram, well, he's going to go into Gilgamesh's employ as the court musician. He's going to write down his version of this adventure, and it'll become the oldest known story in your world. Of course, no one will remember that he wrote it, but you could pick up a copy of it in a good bookshop in Perivale. He smiled. If there are any good bookshops in Perivale. Mind you, since Gilgamesh is paying him for it, I'll give you 3 guesses who ends up the hero. It figures, Ace said glumly. And what about Avram and Ngula? History doesn't say. In the grand scheme of things, a musician and his wife aren't considered very important. You can imagine a happy ending there if you like. Thanks a lot. She surveyed the horizon again. Well, I guess we should be going. Bored so soon. Not exactly. I just want a more varied diet. I'm getting really sick of baked pheasant, and that barley beer makes me want to puke. The doctor smiled again. Back to the TARDIS and the food machine, eh? He looked back at the conversing kings. I think it's high time we slipped away too. Off we go. To Ace's disappointment, nobody seemed to notice their departure. She had rather enjoyed the attention that she'd been getting during the past few days. Still, the Kishites had a lot of cleaning up to do, so she couldn't blame them. She and the doctor briskly strode back across the fields towards the oasis where the TARDIS waited. They were almost there when something occurred to her. Wait, Professor? What about this Timewyrm thingy? We've not seen hide nor hair of it. Yes, I wondered about that myself. The only thing I can conclude is that the message I triggered was for some other time. When I was fiddling about with the telepathic circuits, I must have started it up early. Ace shrugged. It makes as much sense as anything else about you. Cheeky! The doctor unlocked the TARDIS and ushered her in. I've a good mind to leave you here, you ungrateful wretch. But then who'd tell you how brilliant you are, she said. And speaking of having a good mind, are you back to normal now? When you were your old self, you kept getting things muddled. It's hardly surprising, he replied, crossing to the time controls. As he began to set the coordinates, he added, there are physical aspects of personality too, you know. My third persona was a bit annoyed at what he was stuck with for an exterior. I was always very vain back then. It must have caused him some grief. But now I'm whole and complete again. He's back in the closets of my mind where he belongs, and I'm the captain of my own mind once more. Which reminds me, Ace said, I don't remember that you ever apologised to me for mucking about with my memories. I still haven't forgiven you for that, you know. He regarded her through the glass column of the time rotor. A puckish grin twitched at the corners of his mouth. Ah, but how do you know that I didn't apologise and that you've just forgotten about it? Don't start that, she begged. My memories are important to me, you know. She shuddered. It was horrible when I woke up and didn't know who I was. Yes, he agreed. Memories are a very important part of ourselves. Without them, we're just flotsam and jetsam in the seas of time. He seemed haunted by his thoughts and patted the console. I sometimes wonder if it's a good idea to ever wipe out my old memories. I lose enough when I regenerate as it is. He eyed her up again. I'd advise you never to take up that business. The price you pay for it is perhaps a shade too high for most beings. It might have been difficult for you to maintain a sense of your own identity without your memories. But think for a moment how I must feel when the only memories I have really belong to some other distinct personality who once shared this body with me. A bit rough, eh? But endurable, he added. Still, with great power comes great responsibility. Ace grinned. Is that from that Hegel bloke again? No. Marvel Comics, I think. He smiled impishly. I don't quite remember. Ace laughed. It was impossible to stay angry with him for long. His quixotic nature was too infectious. Besides, as she had told Enkidu, the Doctor was one of the few people she'd ever met whose purposes she almost fully agreed with, when he bothered to share them with her. So, she asked, now where are we off to? His fingers began to dance across the controls. Oh, I thought we deserved a little vacation after all of that. I was thinking of... He broke off and looked at her. No, you did a good job back there, Ace. You choose. Anywhere, any time. She thought for a moment. Well, there is one place, but you'd probably find it boring. Never, he replied. There's always something fascinating to see and do. Well, I've always had this dream of travelling in a paddle boat on the Mississippi River, she sighed. With all of the gamblers and the ladies in their posh dresses and the fella at the honky-tonk piano playing, waiting for the Robert E. Lee, he suggested, eyes twinkling. Well, why not? He finished setting the destination. I've always wanted to try a mint julep myself. With a flourish, he set the time rotor in motion. Accompanied by the usual cacophony, the TARDIS slipped out of phase with the Earth and back into the maelstrom of the vortex. Well, that's a relief. Ace frowned and pointed. Hey, your pocket's bleeping. The Doctor stared down at the pocket in question. Odd. I wonder why it's doing that. He stuck in his hand and pulled out a small device. A red light on it was flashing in time with the electronic noises. The time path indicator. Ace had virtually forgotten about his little device. Didn't you say that it only registers when there was something moving through time straight at us? Yes. He began feverishly connecting it back into the main console. Then it has to be the Timewyrm, doesn't it? He nodded, and she could see an excited gleam in his eye. At last.